Now, the whole world rejoicing together.
Samsung Electronics earned a record-breaking operating profit in the first quarter of this year, up more than eightfold from a year earlier. It surpassed 57 trillion Korean won, or nearly $38 million for the first time, driven by strong demand for memory chips used for AI and data centers. U.S. President Donald Trump continues to threaten Iran, saying Tehran could face full destruction of bridges and power plants if a Tuesday evening deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz is not met. Iran has rejected a 45-day ceasefire proposal and said it wants a permanent end to the war. Instead, it responded with its own 10-point plan, while dismissing U.S. threats as baseless. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. Samsung Electronics' preliminary report for the first quarter has been disclosed, and the company shattered records with the help of the boom in the AI industry and its demand for memory chips. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
Samsung Electronics' first quarter profit beat its total for all of last year. The company announced first quarter profits of 57.2 trillion Korean won, or approximately $37.9 billion. This sets a new record for the highest quarterly operating profit in the company's history. According to the company's preliminary earnings report released Tuesday, the operating profit is a 755% surge compared to the same period in 2025. Sales reached 133 trillion won, or roughly $88.1 billion. That represents a 68% increase on year. This follows a record-breaking fourth quarter of 2025, which saw 20.1 trillion won in profit. With just the first quarter results of 2026, Samsung is already nearing its highest ever annual operating profit of 58.89 trillion won recorded during the semiconductor supercycle in 2018. While market analysts had widely expected a strong performance, the record-breaking figures even outpaced initial forecasts. This historic performance is underpinned by a semiconductor superboom. The primary driver is the explosive global demand for AI computing, which caused DRAM and NAND prices to surge by approximately 90% compared to the previous quarter. Securities analysts estimate that the semiconductor division's operating profit alone exceeded 50 trillion won, essentially driving the entire company's earnings. Specifically, they estimate that DRAM alone recorded over 41 trillion won in operating profit. Furthermore, the company's expanding capacity and market share in high bandwidth memory, or HBM, is expected to inject further positivity into the business moving forward. A favorable exchange rate also provided a significant financial tailwind during the first quarter. Samsung's mobile and smartphone divisions also contributed to the bottom line, bolstered by the recent launch of Samsung's flagship AI-integrated handsets series earlier this year. The finalized and fully audited financial results, including specific division performances, will be disclosed later this month following board approval. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Over in the United States, President Donald Trump continues to threaten Iran, saying Tehran could face full destruction of bridges and power plants if a Tuesday evening deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz is not met. He also lashed out at allies, including South Korea, for their lack of support. Our Kim Jun-ong reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday issued an ultimatum to Iran, saying all power plants and bridges would be destroyed unless the Strait of Hormuz is reopened, and the deal aimed at ending the 5-week conflict is agreed. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Monday, Trump said he was not at all concerned that such action could amount to war crimes, and that he had already given Tehran enough extensions, and the Tuesday 8 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time deadline is final.
But we're giving them till tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and after that, they're going to have no bridges, they're going to have no power plants,
Trump went on to say that total destruction would be carried out by midnight and that Iran must accept the deal he deems acceptable, reiterating that reopening the Strait of Hormuz remains his top priority in any agreement with Tehran. The U.S. president also criticized European and Asian allies for failing to support Washington in its conflict with Iran, specifically naming South Korea. Repeating his description of NATO as a, quote, paper tiger, he said the alliance had offered little support in the war.
And it's not just NATO. You know who else didn't help us? South Korea didn't help us. You know who else didn't help us? Australia didn't help us. You know who else didn't help us? Japan.
He wrapped up his press conference with renewed frustration over the lack of response to last month's call for naval deployments to the Strait of Hormuz. Trump pointed to what he said is 45,000 U.S. troops stationed in South Korea, though the actual figure is closer to 28,000. He stressed that their deployment was to offer protection against nuclear-armed North Korea. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
Iran has rejected a 45-day temporary ceasefire proposal, calling instead for a permanent end to the conflict. Washington warns of possible strikes if no deal is reached, as Iran confirms a top IRGC commander has been killed. Our Lee Seung-jae has the details.
Iran has rejected a 45-day temporary ceasefire plan delivered to both Washington and Tehran by regional intermediaries, calling instead for a permanent end to the conflict. According to Iran state news agency IRNA on Monday, Tehran has instead submitted a 10-point response via Pakistan, rejecting a temporary ceasefire and outlining demands including an end to regional conflicts, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, reconstruction of war-damaged areas, and the lifting of international sanctions. U.S. President Donald Trump described Iran's proposal as a significant step, but said it was not good enough, warning of sweeping strikes on Iranian infrastructure if no deal is reached. Iran on Monday dismissed the threats as baseless.
The rude rhetoric, arrogance and baseless threats of the delusional U.S. president arising from the deadlock he faces and aimed at justifying the repeated defeats of the U.S. military will have no effect on the continuation of offensive and crushing operations by the fighters of Islam against U.S. and Israeli enemies.
The exchange follows reports that Washington sent a 15-point peace plan proposal through Pakistan in late March, which Iran rejected as unrealistic and disconnected from battlefield conditions. Meanwhile, tensions escalated on the ground. Iran confirmed the death of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' intelligence chief, Majid Kademi, in an overnight strike blamed on U.S. and Israeli forces. Israel later confirmed responsibility, with Defense Minister Israel Katz calling Kademi a top commander responsible for war crimes. The Israel Defense Forces said he was among the IRGC's most senior figures, underscoring a widening conflict with no clear path to de-escalation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's presidential chief of staff Kang Won-sik is set to visit Kazakhstan, Oman, and Saudi Arabia as President Lee Jae-myung's special envoy for strategic economic cooperation. Kang will depart on Tuesday and told reporters that he will discuss securing additional supplies of crude oil and naphtha as South Korea seeks alternative energy routes that bypass the Strait of Hormuz. He made a similar trip to the United Arab Emirates last month, which secured a deal to import 24 million barrels of crude oil. President Lee Jae-myung is hosting the two leaders of the nation's main political parties over lunch. Democratic Party leader Chung Chong-rae and People Power Party leader Chang Dong-hyuk joined today's lunchtime meeting at the Blue House. They're likely to focus on discussing measures to address the economic fallout from the war in the Middle East. The president is expected to ask for bipartisan support for the swift parliamentary passage of the government's war response extra budget of about 26 trillion Korean won, or 17 billion US dollars. The three-way meeting is the first of its kind in about 7 months. The second day of government questioning sessions at the National Assembly took place on Monday, focusing on the economy and the government's proposed supplementary budget to support people's livelihoods. Our political correspondent An Sung-jin has the details.
Fierce political battles continued through the second day of government questioning sessions, which this time focused on the economy, especially the Middle East's impact on it. The National Assembly convened a plenary session on Monday with government officials, including Prime Minister Kim Min-seok and Finance Minister Gu Yun-chul present. As anticipated, lawmakers from the ruling and opposition parties clashed over the government's proposed supplementary budget, drafted in response to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. The plan proposes spending around 26.2 trillion Korean won, or $17.4 billion to alleviate the impact on the public, SMEs, and businesses in general. The ruling Democratic Party continued to stress its efforts on examining broader measures tied to energy security and the economy by expanding shipping routes, including passage through the Red Sea and diversifying supply sources and regions.
The Middle East situation accelerated a transition toward renewable energy to reduce structural reliance on fossil fuels. We look to expand the diversity of energy types and supply chains to better withstand external shocks.
The main opposition People Power Party argued that key components of the budget proposal, such as subsidies to offset high energy prices and funding for renewable energy projects, are mere cash handouts for electoral purposes.
There are growing concerns that with liquidity already on the rise, pushing through an additional supplementary budget could further expand money supply and put pressure on the exchange rate.
Rising energy costs, prolonged supply chain instability, and the development of chip clusters were also discussed during the session, with lawmakers pressing the government to detail its contingency measures. The supplementary budget will be further scrutinized by the Parliamentary Budget Committee over the next 2 days, with debate expected to continue to the next plenary session this Friday. In the meantime, the National Assembly will hold its last questioning session on social issues next Monday. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Seoul will impose a 5-day vehicle rotation at public parking lots after raising its energy security alert to caution amid the prolonged Middle East conflict. Starting tomorrow, the measure applies to 75 facilities and covers passenger cars with 10 seats or fewer, with weekday entry based on the last digit on the vehicle's license plate. Weekends and holidays are exempt. 33 locations in traditional markets, commercial areas, and dense neighborhoods are excluded to limit disruption. Exemptions also cover vehicles for people with disabilities, national merit recipients, pregnant women, and emergency use. Electric and hydrogen cars are allowed, while compact and hybrid vehicles remain subject to the rule. North Korea appears to be stepping up efforts to position Kim Jong-un as the successor of her father, while also advancing its missile capabilities, according to South Korea's National Intelligence Service. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
North Korea seems to be accelerating efforts to make regime leader Kim Jong-un's daughter, Kim Joo-ae, his successor, according to the National Intelligence Service on Monday. During a closed briefing to the National Assembly Intelligence Committee, the NIS said Joo-ae has recently made appearances in defense-related areas, such as driving a new battle tank with her father. This is seen as paying homage to Kim Jong-un during his own successor period and is aimed at easing doubts about a female successor while strengthening the succession narrative.
What stood out was the shift of the phrase used, from preparing as a successor to actively consolidating her status as one.
The agency also was quoted as saying that the regime appears to be coming up with a new ICBM that can carry multiple warheads.
An engine test to improve a solid-fuel ICBM was conducted in late March, with increased thrust and a lighter carbon fiber airframe. It may be capable of carrying multiple warheads, and the agency is closely monitoring it.
The agency also pointed out how the regime is diluting the legacy of previous leaders while maximizing Kim Jong-un's stature by structural reforms. References to the Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il ideology have been reduced, while Kim Jong-un was referred to as the head of state for the first time, reflecting moves to normalize the state through institutional reforms. An expert says this is to show the regime as one of the major powers in global society.
Based on the confidence of having nuclear weapons, Kim Jong-un is asserting that North Korea is not part of a U.S.-led unipolar order, but rather a member of a multipolar system, standing among the ranks of major powers.
Meanwhile, on the war in the Middle East, the agency expected the conflict to enter a lull around the end of April. 김보경, Arirang News.
Global K-pop sensation Blackpink's Jennie has made Billboard history once again, setting another milestone for K-pop female soloists. With her latest entry, Dracula, which is a remix of Australian rock band Tame Impala's track, Jennie now has 7 songs that have charted on the Billboard Hot 100. This breaks her own record for the most entries by a K-pop female solo artist. According to Billboard, Dracula entered the charts on Monday at number 24, which also marks Jennie's highest personal ranking to date on the main singles chart.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Russian drones struck Ukraine's Black Sea port city of Odesa overnight on Monday, killing a 30-year-old mother, her 2-year-old daughter, and 1 other woman. Residential buildings, energy infrastructure, and a kindergarten were damaged in the attack. Odesa's regional governor said 16 people sustained injuries, including a pregnant woman and 2 small children. Around 16,700 households across several districts lost power, with the energy company saying repairs would take significant time. President Vladimir Zelensky said Russia launched 140 drones at Ukraine in overnight attacks, also striking energy infrastructure across the Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, and Dnipro regions. Over the past week alone, Russia has attacked Ukraine with more than 2,800 attack drones, nearly 1,350 guided aerial bombs, and over 40 missiles. Zelensky renewed his call for additional air defense systems, saying Russia has no intention of stopping. The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday handed Trump's former advisor Steve Bannon a significant legal victory, issuing an order that opens the door to the dismissal of his criminal contempt of Congress conviction. The justices set aside an appeals court decision that had kept Bannon's 2022 conviction intact, and with that appeal ruling now thrown out, a federal trial judge can proceed with the Trump administration's pending request to drop the case entirely. Bannon has already completed a 4-month prison term following his conviction for defying a subpoena from the House committee that investigated the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. The Justice Department, which pursued the case under the Biden administration, abandoned its defense of the conviction after Trump took office for a second term. The head of the International Monetary Fund said on Monday that the war in the Middle East is set to push inflation higher and slow global growth, warning that even a swift end to hostilities will not prevent a downgrade to the IMF's economic outlook. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said the conflict has reduced global oil supply by 13%, disrupting energy shipments and supply chains from helium to fertilizers. She said the deeper and longer the war runs, the greater the damage to growth and prices worldwide. The IMF releases its full World Economic Outlook on April 14th, where the war is expected to dominate discussions among global finance officials. NASA's Artemis II crew set a new human spaceflight distance record on Monday, traveling 252,755 miles from Earth. They traveled further from Earth than the previous record set by Apollo 13 almost 56 years ago. Astronauts Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Canadian Jeremy Hansen spent their 6th day in space on approach to the moon's far side, a region only Apollo crews who completed the full lunar orbit have ever seen directly. The crew proposed names for previously unnamed lunar craters, including one honoring Mission Commander Wiseman's late wife, Carol. During a 6-hour flyby, the astronauts photographed the far side of the moon. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
Temperatures took a sudden dive overnight. It was a very chilly start to the day with strong winds and even cold wave alerts in parts of Gangwon-do province. But this is not just a one-day thing. Temperatures will stay below seasonal norms this week, so make sure to dress accordingly so as not to catch a cold. But at least we'll have stunning sunshine with good air quality nationwide. And this afternoon, Seoul and Gwangju will only get up to 13 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gyeongju will make it to 14 degrees. So if you're heading out to enjoy spring blossoms, make sure to dress in extra layers. Looking ahead, rain is expected nationwide between Thursday and Friday, with heavier rain expected for Jeju and the south coast. Then starting this weekend, we'll notice much warmer temperatures, almost t-shirt weather. So until then, stay safe and warm.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.